They gave the infertile alien princess to a human as a joke, but she returned as a mother. Her pale silver hair shimmered under the twin moons of her homeworld, and her eyes, violet and deep, could unsettle even the most confident noble. Yet behind her beauty and grace, a shadow followed her, a whisper of inadequacy that had haunted her since birth. She was said to be infertile, unable to bear children, a fate rare and cruel among the Arthurians. In a world where legacy was everything, it was a mark of shame no title or wealth could erase. The royal gala on the neutral human colony was meant to be a display of power, elegance, and diplomacy. The greatest houses of the galaxy had gathered, their ships glittering like falling stars, each vying for prestige and subtle advantage. Lyra's family, proud and ambitious, hoped to cement alliances, but her rivals had other plans. "They'll see her for what she truly is," whispered Lord Varric, a sly noble with a reputation for cruelty. His grin was sharp like a blade. "A princess who cannot fulfill her duty. A laughingstock, and we shall be the ones to gift her to someone who will bear the joke for us." Lyra's heart sank as she realized the meaning behind the whispered words. She had been warned of political schemes before, but nothing had prepared her for this. The mocking gift was meant to humiliate her in front of every powerful noble in attendance, a cruel spectacle. When the emissaries approached her, they spoke with feigned warmth. "Princess Lyra, you honor us by accepting this union with a human noble. Consider it a gift, a symbol of your grace extending beyond the stars." The human noble's name was Kale. He was tall, with a quiet confidence that set him apart from the theatrics of other nobles. His dark hair framed a face calm and unreadable. Unlike the others, he did not laugh or sneer. He merely bowed, a faint, polite smile on his lips. Lyra's pride flared. She refused to feel humiliated in front of this man, or the galaxy. Her chin lifted, silver hair cascading down her back like a river of moonlight. "I do not see why I must accept this gift," she said, her voice firm but elegant. "I am no prize to be given or taken." Kale's gaze did not waver. "I did not ask for you as a gift, princess," he said evenly. "I accept your presence as a guest of honor, nothing more. Your dignity is yours to keep if you wish it." Even in her anger, Lyra felt a strange spark of curiosity. Most humans she had met were either weak or loud, but Kale held a strength in stillness. Yet she could not allow herself to be distracted. She had been humiliated, and she would not forget it. The first days in Kale's human realm were a delicate dance of tension and restraint. His palace was grand but strange to her Arthurian eyes. The ceilings were lower than she preferred, the walls darker, adorned with tapestries that told stories she could not read. Every room was carefully ordered, almost austere, yet beneath the walls, quiet elegance was a sense of power. Kale ruled this space with subtle authority. His presence felt even when he was not in the room. Lyra's anger simmered as she tried to assert herself. She insisted on walking alone through the palace gardens, only to find Kale already waiting in the shade of a flowering tree, watching her silently. "You are restless," he said simply. "I am not restless," she replied, biting back a retort. "I am free, and I intend to remain so. Even here in your strange human palace." Kale tilted his head slightly, as if considering her words. "Freedom is measured differently on my world," he said. "Here, the rules are simple. You may walk wherever you please, but you cannot escape the consequences of your actions." "That, princess, is true freedom." Lyra bristled, but she could not deny the truth in his words. The human world operated on a different logic, a mix of law, subtle influence, and quiet observation. She was a stranger here, and yet Kale had made her presence acceptable. That, she admitted reluctantly, was more than her rivals had expected. Evenings were worse. The gala had introduced her to human nobles who whispered and watched, eager for scandal. Lyra's pride was her shield, and she wielded it expertly. But beneath the carefully composed exterior, her heart trembled. She was alone in a foreign world, a pawn in a game far larger than herself. And yet, she could not bring herself to hate Kale. His quiet strength, the way he spoke without arrogance, and the moments when his eyes held her gaze just a heartbeat too long, these things unsettled her more than any insult could. Then came the night that changed everything. Lyra, restless and unable to sleep, wandered the palace halls. Her footsteps echoed in the emptiness, silver hair brushing the floor. The corridors were quiet, lit only by the soft glow of lanterns. She paused near the mirrored walls, tracing her reflection with a finger. Pride, beauty, and shame all stared back at her. A strange sensation prickled at her wrist. She looked down and gasped. A faint, shimmering mark glowed softly beneath her skin, like starlight trapped under glass. It pulsed gently, almost alive, in rhythm with her heartbeat. She had never seen anything like it. What is this?" she whispered to herself. Kale's voice answered, calm and even, from behind her. "It is not a mark I have seen before, but it is not accidental. It seems tied to you, princess. Perhaps it always has been." Lyra spun around, heart racing. "Do you know what it is?" "I do not," he admitted, "but it is powerful, and it is waking." The mark pulsed again, brighter this time, as if responding to his words or perhaps to him. Lyra felt a strange warmth, a pull she could not name. Fear, curiosity, and longing twisted together inside her, an emotion she could neither control nor understand. For the first time, she realized that she was more than a princess mocked by her peers. She was something else, something dangerous and alive, though she did not yet know how. Kale's presence was no longer just a curiosity, it was a tether she could not sever. "Do you feel it?" he asked softly, stepping closer. "The way it responds to me." Lyra shook her head, but her body betrayed her, a shiver running down her spine. I don't understand it." "Then perhaps we must learn together," Kale said, his voice low, almost reverent. "This is no simple curse or joke. There is more at work here than pride or politics." Lyra swallowed hard, anger and fear mingling with something dangerous, a spark of hope. She had been given to Kale as a joke, meant to humiliate her. But now, in the quiet of the palace, under the twin moons of this human world, she wondered if she had been given a gift instead, an opportunity to discover herself, to understand a power she never knew she possessed. Days turned into weeks. Lyra moved through the human palace with growing awareness of her mark and its strange responses. Flowers bloomed unnaturally where she walked, shadows seemed to shift toward her presence, and whispers echoed in empty halls, as though the walls themselves were speaking to her. Kale observed quietly, never pushing her but always nearby, a steady presence she could neither ignore nor fully trust. The more she learned about the human world, the more she understood the depth of Kale's restraint. He never tried to command her, never tried to charm her, but his quiet confidence was a force she could not resist. And yet, every time she caught herself studying him, a surge of anger followed, anger at being given to him, anger at the thrill she felt despite herself. One evening, as the suns of the human colony set and bathed the palace in golden light, Kale led her to a balcony overlooking the city. The air was warm, fragrant with distant gardens, and the city lights twinkled like scattered stars. "You see it now," he said softly. "The world is not as cruel as they make it seem. Power is not always in ridicule or conquest. Sometimes it is in patience, in understanding, in the quiet bonds we choose to form." Lyra's heart raced. She wanted to argue, to claim that her world had taught her otherwise, but she could not. The truth of his words resonated in a way she had never expected. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not a human playing a noble's game, but someone who could match her mind, challenge her heart, and perhaps even change her. Her mark pulsed faintly against her wrist, warm and insistent, a reminder that her journey had only begun. She realized then that humiliation had been the first step, not the end. Something far larger awaited her, something tied to power, legacy, and a destiny she had yet to claim. And as the twin moons rose in the sky, casting silver light over the palace, Lyra made a silent vow. She would not be a pawn, a laughingstock, or a forgotten princess. She would discover the truth of her mark, the strength it held, and the bond she could forge with Kale, whether he wished it or not. The night held its breath, waiting. And somewhere deep inside her, Lyra knew, her story was only beginning. The days after the discovery of the glowing mark were restless for Princess Lyra. The palace, which had once felt imposing and alien, now seemed alive, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath, watching her every move. Even the simplest tasks carried weight. The air felt heavier, charged with a strange energy that made her pulse quicken. Kale observed her quietly, never pushing, never questioning. His presence was a steady anchor in the shifting currents of her fear and curiosity. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, she would catch him staring, his dark eyes calm yet unreadable. And each time, she felt a flicker of something she could neither name nor control, something like longing or recognition, buried deep within her chest. The mark on her wrist pulsed more strongly with each passing day. At first it glimmered faintly when she was alone, but soon it reacted to Kale's presence, glowing brighter whenever he was near. One evening in the grand hall where the moonlight fell through the high windows, Lyra felt it surge unexpectedly, warm and insistent. "Again," Kale murmured, his voice soft, almost careful. "It responds to me, doesn't it?" Lyra pulled her sleeve down instinctively. I don't know why," she admitted, her voice tight. "It's like it has a mind of its own." Kale stepped closer, hands open in a gesture of peace. "Perhaps it does. Perhaps it is waiting for something or someone." Lyra's gaze narrowed. "And you think you know what it wants?" "I only know that it is alive," he replied, "and it is connected to you." The words sent a shiver down her spine. Alive, connected. Those two words, simple and yet heavy with meaning, carried a promise she did not yet fully understand. Days turned into weeks. Lyra began to explore the palace gardens, testing the mark's reactions. She noticed small miracles, flowers blooming where she walked, leaves turning toward her, and shadows stretching differently as if reaching for her. The palace staff whispered among themselves, calling her presence unusual, powerful. But the whispers did not trouble her as much as the rising awareness that her strength was growing, slowly, unpredictably, and dangerously beautiful. Kale, ever patient, observed from a distance. He did not interfere, but he never left her alone. His guidance was subtle, often in the form of a quiet suggestion or an insightful remark. And yet, Lyra felt a tension between them that was impossible to ignore. Every shared glance, every unspoken word carried weight. Pride clashed with curiosity, anger with attraction, and fear with a growing fascination she could not name. One evening, Lyra was walking along a secluded terrace when the mark pulsed violently. She stumbled, clutching her wrist as an unearthly warmth spread through her body. Shadows in the terrace flickered and stretched toward her as though alive. Kale appeared suddenly, his presence solid and grounding. "Lyra, step back," he said, his voice calm but firm. "It's stronger tonight." She took a hesitant step, but the pull from the mark made her freeze. I can feel it," she whispered. "It wants something." Kale studied her carefully. "Perhaps it is waiting for a bond, a connection that is more than proximity. Maybe it is seeking trust." Lyra's chest tightened. The idea of trust was foreign, complicated, and frightening. She had been betrayed, mocked, and used before. And yet, she could not deny that she wanted to understand this strange power, this mark, and its connection to Kale. The following days brought more discoveries. She found she could sense emotions in subtle waves, almost like the mark gave her glimpses into the hearts of others. Kale noticed her growing abilities and encouraged her to practice control. "You must learn to calm your mind," he told her one morning in the palace gardens. "If your focus wavers, the power will take control." Lyra frowned, frustration flickering in her violet eyes. "How can I focus when it feels alive, like it wants to break free?" Kale's gaze softened. Then channel it. Let it follow your will, not the other way around. She tried day after day, learning to steady her thoughts and direct the glowing mark. The process was slow, often painful, but each success brought a sense of wonder and pride. And with every small victory, the invisible bond between her and Kale grew stronger. Neither of them spoke of it, but both felt it, a silent acknowledgement that their fates were entwined in ways neither fully understood. Amidst these lessons, a shadow from her past appeared. An emissary from the Arthurian Empire arrived unexpectedly, bearing a message. Lyra's heart sank when she saw him. He was tall and imposing, his uniform decorated with the symbols of her world's ruling council. His eyes were sharp, assessing, almost accusing. "Princess Lyra," he said formally, bowing slightly, "the council requests your immediate return. There are developments concerning your absence and the mark." Lyra's stomach tightened. "I am learning to control it," she said cautiously. "I will not return until I understand its power." The emissary's lips pressed into a thin line. "That is not your decision alone. Your people fear what you might become. Your mark is unique, and it could bring consequences beyond what you realize." Kale stepped forward, his presence steady and protective. "She will return when she chooses, and she will do so with understanding, not fear." The emissary's eyes flicked to Kale, wary, then back to Lyra. "This is not a request. The council will decide, Princess. Be warned." Once he departed, Lyra felt a mixture of anger and unease. Her people had sent her to this human world to be humiliated, and now they demanded obedience. Yet in Kale's calm gaze, she found courage. He was not a human ruler who sought to control her, but a partner in discovery, patient and strong. The nights grew longer and colder, and Lyra found herself restless, wandering the palace corridors while Kale read in the library or monitored the city from the balcony. One night, the mark pulsed with an intensity that made the air vibrate. Lyra fell to her knees, clutching her wrist, struggling to control the warmth that spread through her. Kale was there instantly, kneeling beside her. "Steady yourself," he said gently. "Focus on your breath, not the power." Lyra closed her eyes, trying to obey. Slowly, the pulsing lessened, and the warmth turned into a steady, manageable glow. She opened her eyes to find Kale watching her, concern and something unspoken reflected in his dark gaze. "You are stronger than you realize," he said softly. "But power without control can be dangerous. We must learn together." Lyra swallowed hard, heart pounding. I trust you," she said, barely above a whisper. Kale's eyes softened. "Then we will face this together, always." The bond between them deepened, unspoken but undeniable. They trained together, explored her abilities, and navigated the intricacies of human politics. Lyra discovered she could manipulate light and shadow subtly, create warmth or cold with a thought, and even sense the emotions of those around her. Each discovery brought awe and fear in equal measure. And yet, the political tension from her home world lingered like a shadow over their days. Rumors of her mark and her unnatural power began to spread among visiting dignitaries and palace staff. Lyra knew that sooner or later the emissary's warning would become reality. One evening, as Lyra and Kale walked through the moonlit gardens, a soft wind carried a whisper that seemed almost human. Lyra stopped, hand raised instinctively toward the source. "Do you hear that?" she asked. Kale nodded. "The mark is speaking again, or someone or something is trying to reach you through it." A shiver ran through her. "Why now? What does it want?" Kale's gaze met hers, calm but intense. "Perhaps it wants you to understand that your journey is only beginning. There are forces beyond us, Princess, and the mark is a bridge to them. But we must be careful. Others will seek it too." Lyra's chest tightened with a mix of fear and excitement. She had been given to Kale as a joke, forced into a human world by political cruelty. And yet, here, in the quiet of the moonlit gardens, with a man who challenged and understood her, she felt the first stirrings of purpose and power. Her mark pulsed softly, a gentle glow against her pale skin, as if acknowledging her resolve. Lyra realized that her humiliation had been only the beginning. Ahead lay discovery, danger, and the awakening of a power that could change not only her fate but the fate of her world. The night was quiet, but the palace seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what was to come. And Lyra knew, deep inside, that soon the past and the present would collide, and her strength, her courage, and her bond with Kale would be tested like never before. The stars of Lyra's homeworld had always seemed distant and cold, even from the observation deck of Kale's ship. Now, as the planet grew larger in view, her chest tightened. She had spent weeks learning to control the mark, to understand its subtle language and strange pull. She had grown stronger, more aware, and in some ways, freer than she had ever been. Yet returning home meant facing her past, the mockery, the political schemes, and the heavy expectations of a world that had always measured her by her so-called curse. Kale stood beside her, calm and steady as ever. His presence was a silent promise she would not face this alone. Lyra glanced at him, violet eyes softening despite the anxiety gripping her. "Are you ready for what awaits us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale's dark eyes met hers, unwavering. "I am ready if you are. Whatever they intend, whatever they plan, we face it together." The ship's landing was met with tension, the air thick with whispered speculation. Arthurian guards, nobles, and advisors lined the palace gates, their expressions a mixture of surprise, suspicion, and awe. They had heard rumors of her powers, of the strange glow that had marked her in the human world, but seeing her now, tall, poised, with her mark faintly shimmering beneath her sleeve, was a shock that few could mask. An emissary stepped forward, bowing low. "Princess Lyra," he said, voice careful, "the council is awaiting your presence. They have questions about your journey and your abilities." Lyra's gaze flicked to Kale. "I will answer them," she said softly, "but on my terms." Kale nodded, silent support in his expression. Together, they walked through the grand halls of her ancestral palace. It was familiar and alien at once. The marble floors reflected the high, vaulted ceilings, and intricate tapestries told the history of the Arthurian Empire, stories of conquest, triumph, and lineage. But to Lyra, they were reminders of the weight she had carried all her life, the pressure to be perfect, the fear of failing, and the shame of being labeled incomplete. The council chamber was a room of power, austere and intimidating. At its center, the ruling council awaited, noble faces carved with suspicion and authority. Lyra felt the eyes of her people on her, their judgment heavy, their whispers almost audible. "Princess Lyra," began Lord Varric, his voice smooth and dangerous, "we have been informed of unusual developments during your stay among humans. Your mark, your abilities, they are unprecedented. How do you explain this?" Lyra stood tall, her violet eyes flashing. "I was sent as a gift to be humiliated and controlled," she said, voice steady. "Instead, I learned. I discovered power I never knew I had. I will not be treated as a pawn or a joke." Murmurs rippled through the council. Some eyes widened with fear, others with admiration. Kale's hand brushed hers lightly, grounding her, and she drew strength from his presence. Lord Varric's expression darkened. "Power that defies tradition is dangerous, princess. The council must consider the implications." Lyra's pulse quickened, but she refused to show fear. "I am not dangerous," she said firmly. "I am alive, and I will use my power to protect my people, not to harm them, but I will not be confined by fear or expectation." Kale stepped forward, his voice calm and unwavering. "You underestimate her," he said. "She has grown stronger, wiser, and capable of controlling her abilities. She does not seek chaos. She seeks understanding and balance." A tense silence followed. Some nobles frowned, unconvinced. Others whispered among themselves. Lyra realized the council was a storm she could not calm with words alone. She needed to show them, to prove her mastery, without giving them reason to fear. She raised her hand, letting the faint glow of her mark shine. Shadows in the chamber shifted subtly, moving as though alive, bending toward her without harming anyone. A warmth spread through the room, gentle and steady, like sunlight after a storm. The council members gasped, some stepping back, some leaning forward in awe. "This," Lyra said softly, "is not a curse. It is a gift, and it is mine to control." For a moment the room held its breath. Then Lord Varric's lips twisted in a sneer. "You presume too much, Princess. Power without obedience is dangerous." Lyra's gaze met his, unwavering. "Power without understanding is dangerous," she corrected. "I have learned understanding, and I will not bow to fear or cruelty." The council murmured again, divided between skepticism and wonder. Kale remained at her side, his hand brushing hers lightly, a reminder that she was not alone, that her strength was not just her own but shared with someone who believed in her. Days passed in a tense rhythm. Lyra was scrutinized, questioned, and observed. Every movement, every word carried weight. And yet, she continued to grow into her power, learning to manipulate light and shadow, to sense emotion, and to control the energy that pulsed beneath her skin. Kale guided her, never intrusive, always patient, helping her balance strength with wisdom. One night, the palace gardens called to her. She walked among the silver-leaved trees, the air thick with moonlight. Her mark glowed faintly, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Kale followed silently, a steady shadow beside her. "Do you ever wonder," Lyra asked, "why it responds to me but not to anyone else?" Kale glanced at her, thoughtful. "Perhaps because it recognizes your will, your heart. Or perhaps because it recognizes the bond you have begun to form. Power is rarely separate from connection." Lyra shivered, feeling the weight of his words. Connection. The word carried meaning she had never fully allowed herself to consider. She had been taught to rely on no one, to trust only herself. And yet, Kale had become more than a guide. He had become a partner in this strange, dangerous journey, someone she could rely on, someone she needed. The next day brought news that shattered her careful balance. A faction within the council, fearful of her abilities, had moved against her. They claimed her mark was unnatural, a threat to the empire, and demanded she be confined until it could be controlled or destroyed. Lyra felt her chest tighten, anger and fear rising in equal measure. She had returned to her world stronger, ready to face her past, and now the past threatened to crush her once more. Kale's voice was calm but firm. "We face this together," he said. "We will show them that strength and understanding are not threats but a gift. And you are not alone in this." Lyra drew a deep breath, focusing on the warmth of her mark. Shadows shifted in the room, bending toward her, responding to her command. Light glimmered like silver threads along the walls. She felt power surge through her, steady and strong, no longer wild or uncontrolled. When she entered the council chamber that evening, the members were ready for confrontation. They expected fear, humility, maybe even desperation. What they saw instead was a princess transformed. Lyra walked tall, her mark glowing softly, her presence radiating control and confidence. Kale remained beside her, a silent guardian, his dark eyes unwavering. "You see me as a threat," she said, voice calm but firm. "But the only threat here is fear, fear of what you do not understand. I have learned to control my power, and I will not use it for destruction, only for protection. If you cannot see that, the problem lies with your vision, not mine." Some members murmured, impressed. Others scowled, unsettled. But for the first time, Lyra felt a shift in the balance of power. She was no longer a pawn, no longer a figure of mockery. She was a force to be reckoned with, strong, wise, and unafraid. Even Lord Varric, who had delighted in her humiliation, hesitated, seeing her for the first time not as the infertile princess, but as a woman of power and purpose. That night, after the council had dispersed, Lyra and Kale stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The twin moons of her homeworld reflected in her violet eyes. She felt the weight of her journey, the burden of expectation, and the quiet thrill of discovery all at once. "You have changed," Kale said softly. Lyra smiled faintly, her hand brushing the faint glow of her mark. I had to, they gave me no choice, but I will not be controlled and I will not be afraid. Kale's gaze held hers, intense and unwavering. Whatever comes next, he said, we face it together, and you will not face it alone. A sudden chill passed through the air. Shadows flickered at the edge of the balcony, unnatural and watchful. Lyra's mark pulsed, warning her. Something was coming, an unknown force, drawn to her power, her bond with Kale, or perhaps both. Her heart raced, but she did not step back. She had faced mockery, politics, and fear. Now she would face whatever came next with strength, courage, and the quiet fire that had begun to grow within her. The night was alive with possibilities, danger, and promise. Lyra knew that the real reckoning was only beginning. And as the moons rose high in the sky, she felt the first true stirrings of destiny, one that would test her power, her heart, and her bond with Kale like never before. The twin moons of Lyra's homeworld cast silver light across the palace, painting the walls with long, ghostly shadows. But this night was unlike any she had faced before. The air thrummed with power, charged with the pulse of her glowing mark, which now shone steadily along her pale wrist, spreading warmth that coursed through her veins. Lyra had returned stronger, wiser, and more confident than ever. She had faced the council, proven her control over her mark, and shown the Arthurians that fear alone could not define her. Yet as she stood on the balcony, Kale beside her, a new danger loomed, one she had not anticipated. The shadows around the palace began to stir unnaturally, twisting and moving as if alive. Lyra's mark pulsed violently, warning her of the approaching threat. They've come, Kale said quietly, dark eyes scanning the horizon. Those who fear your power, they will not let it go unchecked. Lyra clenched her fists. Let them come. I will not run again. Below, the city gates erupted in chaos. Armed figures dressed in the colors of the rival council faction surged forward. Their intention was clear. They sought to capture her, to suppress her power by force. But Lyra did not feel fear. She felt clarity, purpose, and the bond she shared with Kale guiding her every step. Stay close, she whispered. Together, they descended from the balcony into the heart of the palace. Shadows shifted at her command, moving like protective tendrils to shield her from view. Light danced along the walls, blinding intruders and bending reality in ways that left them stumbling and disoriented. Kale fought with precision, using his strength and skill to hold back attackers, while Lyra focused on controlling the mark. The warmth in her veins intensified, spreading into her arms and chest. She realized with a surge of awe that the mark did more than respond to her will. It amplified her connection to life itself. She could feel the energy of the palace, of the city, and even of the people within her reach. The battle was chaotic but brief. Lyra's power, guided by her focus and connection with Kale, repelled the intruders without serious harm. Shadows twisted and coiled around them, forming barriers, guiding Kale's movements, and overwhelming anyone who dared approach. By the time the sun of her homeworld began to rise, the attackers were retreating, defeated not by violence alone, but by the sheer force of controlled, awakened power. Lyra breathed deeply, heart racing, her mark pulsing steadily now as if satisfied with her control. Kale placed a hand gently on her shoulder. You were magnificent, he said. Not just because of your power, but because of your courage. You did not falter. Lyra's lips curved in a faint smile. I would not have succeeded without you. You are my anchor, Kale. He looked at her with a quiet intensity that made her chest tighten. And you are mine, he said softly. We face everything together, Lyra, always. The palace was quiet now, the danger past, but the political tension remained. Lyra knew the council would attempt to undermine her again, perhaps in more subtle ways. Yet she felt a new resolve, a sense that she could face whatever came, not as a pawn or a mocked princess, but as a leader of her own destiny. That evening, as the palace quieted, Lyra felt a strange, deep warmth in her chest. She paused, placing a hand over her heart. A vision flashed before her eyes, a future she had not dared imagine. She saw herself holding a child, small and delicate, yet radiating a sense of strength and promise. The vision felt real, tangible, and it filled her with awe. Kale noticed her pause. "Lyra?" he asked, concern in his voice. She looked at him, her eyes wide, glowing faintly in the silver moonlight. "Kale, I think I can create life," she whispered, voice trembling with wonder. "The mark, it is not just power, it is a gift, a chance to bring life, to protect life, to build something new." Kale stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "Then we will do it together," he said softly. "Whatever it takes, whatever comes, we will face it as one." Lyra felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, a mix of joy, awe, and relief. For the first time, she truly understood the depth of her mark, the purpose of her power, and the path she was meant to walk. It was not just strength or control, it was creation, connection, and transformation. The following weeks were a time of preparation and growth. Lyra trained with Kale, mastering the full range of her abilities, learning to guide her mark, to create rather than just repel, to nurture life as much as protect it. Her presence in the palace shifted the balance of power. Nobles who had doubted her began to show respect, others watched warily, and some still plotted. But Lyra was no longer afraid. She had seen her potential, and she would not let fear or politics define her. One quiet evening, Lyra sat in the palace garden, her hands glowing faintly with the light of her mark. She felt life stirring within her, a promise, a bond, a creation yet to be born. Kale knelt beside her, hand brushing hers gently, a reminder of their unity. "You are ready," he said softly, "not just for this, but for everything that comes after." Lyra nodded, heart pounding. I feel it. I feel the life within me, the mark guiding me, the connection to everything around me. I am no longer afraid." Kale smiled faintly, his dark eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Then nothing can stand against us," he said. "Together, we are stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, stronger than the world itself." The palace trembled faintly, as if acknowledging her words. Shadows twisted in harmony with her mark, light bending and shifting in delicate patterns, as though the world itself responded to her awakening. Lyra felt a surge of joy and clarity. This was more than power. It was creation, it was destiny, it was love. Days passed, and Lyra's pregnancy became evident, though her mark continued to glow faintly, a protective aura that shielded her and the life growing within. Kale remained at her side, vigilant, patient, and unwavering. Together, they navigated the subtle intrigues of the palace, defended against threats both political and mystical, and prepared for the future with courage and wisdom. One morning, a council member approached cautiously, bowing low. "Princess Lyra, we have reconsidered. Your power, your wisdom, your courage, you are no longer just a princess. You are a leader, a protector, and a mother of the future." Lyra's eyes softened, her mark pulsing gently in response. "Then let it be so," she said. "Let us build a world where fear does not rule, where power is tempered with understanding, and where life, new life, can thrive." The council bowed, some with genuine respect, others with cautious acknowledgement. Lyra knew challenges remained, that dangers both seen and unseen would continue to test her. But for the first time, she felt truly ready. She was no longer a pawn, no longer mocked or diminished. She was Lyra, the princess, the wielder of her mark, the mother of life, and a woman of destiny. That evening, as the sun set over her homeworld, Lyra and Kale stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The twin moons rose, casting silver light across the palace and gardens. Lyra felt the life within her stir, a gentle rhythm that echoed the bond she shared with Kale. "You are incredible," Kale said softly, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "Stronger than anyone I have ever known." Lyra smiled faintly, eyes reflecting the moonlight. "We are incredible together," she said. I could not have done this alone. A soft breeze carried whispers through the palace gardens, as though the world itself recognized her power, her courage, and the life she carried. The shadows and light intertwined, dancing gently around them, a silent acknowledgement of transformation, love, and hope. Lyra placed her hand over her heart, feeling the steady rhythm of the life she nurtured within her. She looked at Kale, her partner, her anchor, her equal, and felt the fullness of everything she had ever desired: trust, connection, courage, and love. The night was quiet, yet alive with promise. Lyra knew that life, power, and destiny were intertwined, and that she had the strength to face whatever came next. The world would test her again, as it always did. But now she would not only endure, she would thrive. She would create. She would love. And with Kale by her side, she knew that even the darkest shadows could be guided into light. Her mark glowed softly, a gentle pulse of life and magic, as the palace and city slept under the twin moons. Lyra's journey had begun as a gift meant to humiliate her, but it had transformed into a story of strength, love, and creation. She was no longer a princess given away as a joke. She was Lyra, the mother of a new future, the guardian of her power, and the keeper of a bond that would endure beyond worlds and stars. The night held its breath, watching her rise. And for the first time, Lyra felt that she was exactly where she was meant to be.